Hello and welcome to Pride and Prejudice and Podcasts. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nat Almorel.
Oh, you're going to let us introduce ourselves every time, are you?
I say this every time. Every podcast that we have ever done, you always say, oh, you're going to let me introduce myself.
Now, is that me not learning or you not taking a hint? That's what I ask. I'm Kurt Halfyard.
I'm Laura Jane Halfyard.
Well, if I were to introduce you, then how would they know which voice is yours?
Oh, yes, because my falsetto is very similar to my wife's.
Exactly. Just right off the bat, I do have an appreciation for Andrew Davies' structure of this, because I think they do a really good job with 6 episodes. They introduce the characters well in the first episode. They put them in a couple of nice situations, get everyone's relations down in the second episode, and I think things really hit the ground running in this third episode in particular. And by the end of it, it's almost astonishing to believe how quickly it goes by, but two, that you're already halfway through the series. And I think at the very end of this episode, which I don't mean to get way ahead, but I think it's a very decided climax to the series. But I really do think the pace really picks up in this third episode. And not to say that it was slow or sluggish in the previous two, but there's a lot of ground to cover, and I think they do it really well.
Well, I think it's pretty economical television in the sense that they don't cut anything either. So, I mean, it's not a very long book, but if you watch the film versions, they cannot possibly do it in 2 hours. So, yeah, I think 6 hours is the right length.
Yeah.
But you do have a point. Even though you do kind of have to watch the episodes in order, each one has a beginning, a middle, and an end, like regular episodic television. And in a way, this, in 1995, I know it's a miniseries, and miniseries there used to be this distinction between, like a Law and Order or In the Heat of the Night, Hill Street Blues, whatever, that they would have episodes but not really be in an arc. If you wanted an arc, you'd get a miniseries like this. But now all television now is arc driven, all the prestige television. And so this feels in some ways more like modern TV than classic miniseries, if that makes sense. Even more than I, Claudius, I would say.
I think another theme that's running through this episode is surprises. Like, it starts out with the surprise of Collins marrying Charlotte Lucas. There's obviously the big surprise revelation or proposal at the end of it. And there's one more that I'm completely... meeting...
Wickham's scheme. Wickham's scheme, is that not a surprise?
Wickham's scheme, but I was thinking also the introduction of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who we finally meet after hearing about her endlessly in the last episode. I'm not sure if it's intended to be that much of a surprise, but I think just how repulsive is maybe too strong a word.
Yeah, but, dreadful. Let's go with the classic British word, dreadful. Yeah. Where do you stand on Lady Catherine de Bourgh?
I don't know. I guess I can see what you say by surprise, because you're just really, can she be that bad? Can she be that untouchable? That whole I don't know, layer above? Yes, good word. But it's just I'm surprised by the fact that she seems to be the only person who can shut Mr. Collins up.
Oh yes.
No.
Oh.
Well, okay, but you pointed out when we were watching it this time, if you watch in the background when it's not like a foregrounded conversation, you'll see Collins and Darcy speaking, and then Darcy has to do something in the foreground. He just gets up. You're right. He doesn't shut him up. He just gets up and leaves. He's like mid-sentence. Like, he doesn't wait. He doesn't even go, oh, Mr. Collins, I got to go. Like, he just, there's such a lack of respect. So I think everyone else just tolerate. I mean, it's unfair because the Bennets have a financial relationship. They have motive not to piss Collins off. I mean, that certainly doesn't stop Elizabeth in the previous episode. But whereas de Bourgh, she's essentially an employee of that. So when she just he's in mid-sentence and she looks over and starts speaking to someone else. That's just, but she's like, I don't like her at all. As much as I don't like Collins, and that's, by design and his sycophantic kind of attitude, de Burgh is both haughty and clueless at the same time, and that's a killer cocktail.
Yeah. Okay, but what do you mean by clueless? Because she's very detailed and she is very involved in the daily life, and
but only to stroke her own ego. Like, not like, I don't feel there's any like there's a line that Collins has at one point when he's dressing down, so to speak, Elizabeth, about don't worry about your peasant clothes. She likes to maintain distinction of rank. There you go. And it's like she only does these things to show her superiority. There's a lovely scene because you've got Darcy, you got Collins, you've got who else? Do you have the Lucas daughter?
Mariah.
And Mariah, Charlotte Mariah. And they're all at Rosings and they're invited to dine several times. During one of the dinners when everybody's there, you just get the sense that Elizabeth, she stands up to de Burgh at one point, but there's a scene where you just get the vibe that she's going, all of you, Darcy included, Collins, you can all have each other. Like, I don't want any of this. And then there's a nice little capstone on that later when she has to leave. Because why does she have to leave? She has to leave early, and de Burgh is trying to, because her father wants her.
That's next session.
Is it? Okay, yeah. I'm getting ahead of myself. But the capstone is because, or the capstone is Collins saying, you were privileged to be able to dine so many times in such a short span, and she kind of says, well, like her version of whatever. It's polite, but it's a total dismissal, which of course Collins misses.
Well, now what I thought you were going to say when you were talking about Collins' reactions during that is, and I'm not sure if it's that prevalent in this episode, but it certainly is in the next one. Whenever they have Catherine de Burgh silencing Collins, David Grammer always does this. Puts his hand up to his mouth, very, very precise.
It's the 19th century polite dabbing that Collins only does. It's you pointed that out as well. Like the actor, I wonder how much leeway the actor had, or whether he was asked to do those things, but he does have a nice collection of mannerisms that isn't quite as over the top as Mrs. Bennet, but it feels a little more that it feels like you kind of even know now the modern equivalent of this character. Like, it's a very universal. I can see this character in any culture, whether Chinese culture, German, Japanese, American. Like this character is such a. In fact, one might argue almost every character in Pride and Prejudice, all the main, are pretty universal. Maybe that's why the novel has stood such the test of time.
And I think it's difficult to point out the, I guess, real antagonists of it. Excuse me. But I think if you were, obviously Wickham, and then I think Catherine de Burgh, and the first time we meet her, she's kind of buffoonish or kind of a cartoon, but later on, I think you do get the sense that she can do much, much more damage to the Bennet family than Wickham can. I mean, to cause a scandal certainly can damage the family's reputation, but to have this grand dame kind of, I guess, against your family, I don't think they really quite lay out the consequences specifically of what that would be, but I mean, you get a sense that somebody who is very, very, very high up in society, and just the way that Collins seems to regard her is that she is a woman of status and can do a lot of destruction, and that, I mean, that's the point of a lot of the scenes too, and what the comedy comes from is that you watch Lizzie in particular basically take this woman down, but in the subtlest of manners, in which she cannot show that she actually is taking her down.
Yeah, they're all fist pumping moments for me. I can't stand this woman.
Is so involved.
I'll give the filmmakers full credit when she's having the conversation with Elizabeth, and she asks about the sisters being out in society. And she's like, and Elizabeth says, yeah, all 5 of them, they're out, they're at balls or whatever. The youngest one is almost 16 or whatever. And then there's this like Martin Scorsese push in on de Burgh's face, and she's like, all 5? Like it's a big, if you pay attention to the filmmaking, it's a pretty significant like moment. But I don't think, is there ever, I mean, everything that you said, I don't know if the show does a concise job of saying, it doesn't telegraph that de Burgh could be like a home wrecker, like in the sense that if she wanted to, I never get that sense when I watch it. I just look at it that she's frivolous aristocracy. That's what I look at de Burgh. I don't ever see her as
I think
as
one of the
a
differences
villain.
is that, this is my impression, that a lot of time the aristocracy no one sees or no one's involved with, but she is so detailed in her focus, and there's nothing that she does not condescend to give an opinion on.
Shelves in the closets.
Yeah, shelves in the closet, yeah. And how to pack your dresses, yeah.
Oh, that's
some degree
that's
of leeway.
the other-
I mean, people put up with her to quite a vast extent, and there has to be that.
Right.
Well, I guess that is probably how a lot
right
of
of
Britain
rank?
feels about the aristocracy.
Yeah.
We all got to put up with them. I don't know what she does that's value other than offering her opinion.
Which is-
And Elizabeth really, again, we're jumping into the next episode, but Elizabeth smacks that down with Mariah's luggage.
yes.
Oh, yes.
When she's like, she's not. She can give her opinions all you want, but she's not seeing you actually pack. Just fold them however you please.
Now, one last thing on de Burgh, because I want to go back a little bit, but she did kind of remind me of, like, an ancestor of Finchy from the British office. Maybe not with the randiness of it, but just constantly making allusions to the people she knows, or the things that she's done, or how educated she is, and just that massively inflated sense of self-worth, which the Brits do so well.
Well, and that association, of course, would be underlined from the presence of Lucy Davis, who's really smooth-faced, and they go out of their way in the office to make that character be very plain and uninterested. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's by design.
Yeah.
But here, it's interesting. I've seen the actress in quite a few roles, but I forgot she was in this series, and she gets a fair bit of screen time. I mean, for kind of a non-character, she's around. I mean, she's essentially room meat for the Rosings parties. Like, she doesn't really have a purpose of being there other than, blood relative of now Mrs. Collins. Is this the episode where Elizabeth and Charlotte talk about
Yes, we
the
need to have that
geometry
conversation.
of Mr. Collins' house, and how Charlotte has gotten super pragmatic in terms of is there something you wanted to say about that?
Well, no. Well, before we got into that, because I thought that was a fabulous conversation on
architecture?
Well, no, just the role and relationship, right? Is her understanding as how is the smoothest way to make a relationship work, and encouraging exercise, encouraging his view of the road. I just thought that was very wise of her, of how to set it up so that she has a very content life, and her husband does as well. I thought that was good. But before we do that, I think we have to have some kind of comment on Lady Catherine de Bourgh and her behavior in public in relation to the Bennet's family and their relationship in public. Or sorry, their behavior in public, because it has been obvious in the last few sessions that we watched that the behavior of the other Bennets has not necessarily been up to par. But the occasional comment made by Lady Catherine de Bourgh here just is like, really? Are you above all this because you're not talking with your mouth full? Or no, okay, but because of rank? But some of the comments she makes, like, for example, you can go and play the pianoforte in what's her name?
You won't be in anyone's way.
You won't be in anyone's way, right? And just cutting people off, and it very vexes me. And if I was a proficient,
oh yeah, with the piano, yeah. If I deigned to learn the piano, I would be awesome because no one likes music more than me.
But it's just fascinating how
she's obnoxious.
I mean, I think it's different, their characters and how they are not necessarily the politest in society, but it's very interesting how in one family, because they're not of that rank, how it might be seen as poor and rude and interrupting and
I look at it
inappropriate. But her,
it's the Maggie Smith principle, in that once you get to a certain age, you can say whatever you damn well please. So it might not even be rank.
It's not
like a bunch
case.
of young girls that have stuff to lose.
But it's not true in this case, because is Mrs. Bennet not the same age or a similar age as she's close, right?
No, I think they're a whole generation apart.
Well,
anyway.
She has a young girl.
Is it her daughter or her niece that she's trying to marry to?
It's her daughter. She's trying to marry to her nephew. But yeah.
The cousin marrying in this is.
Yes, it is.
It's a tight-knit society. You don't want to travel 20 miles to the next village because it's too far to go. But,
that's right. Easy distance.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm kind of on Lord Jane's side here. Like, I get the sense that Catherine Berg has been like this pretty much her entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing that really comes up a lot in this, is that a lot of people really don't change their character. And that's, I think, all the more of a dramatic impact when Darcy and eventually Lizzie
both make big changes. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Everyone is pretty fixed in this series. And only Charlotte, in her fixedness, has the wiggle room to accommodate, but she's still who she is, right? She just accommodates.
Sorry, did you say Charlotte?
Yes.
Yeah, Charlotte.
Yeah, exactly what I was just going to say. And I was wondering, does it ever come as that much of a shock to you, or at least as much as it seems to be to Lizzie, or maybe on seeing this the first time, that Charlotte accepted Colin's proposal? I don't know if they give enough weight to her character before this episode to really let that hit as hard.
They do in the book.
Yeah,
so
in the
book readers, it would just slide right over, like they would accept it because they know the character. But yeah, they do gloss over.
Yeah, I think
Charlotte.
The only thing that's missing maybe in the book and maybe in this series is the fact that a little more of a history because of her age, like had something else happened beforehand, right? So, but you don't hear that.
I don't know. I think my argument, which I mentioned in the previous episode, is the actress who plays Charlotte Lucas just doesn't fit what the character is like going. In the book, she's described more as frumpy and plain and a homebody, whereas I look at Charlotte Lucas in the miniseries and she seems reasonably cosmopolitan. Yeah. And so, whatever, she's a great actress, and Charlotte, like a couple of the relationships in the book, are not as they're there, and they move characters around geographically. Like the whole thrust of this episode of coming to Rosings and the Collins house is for Elizabeth to visit Charlotte after the wedding, which we don't see. And there's, like you said, there's enough to provide contrast so that you can focus on the magnitude of the Darcy Elizabeth relationship. But it's not the end of the world for me that because she's a side character ultimately.
But it's also somebody, like you said, who's an absolute pragmatist. And the big flaw of Lizzie and Darcy is it's the name of the book. And with Charlotte, you have somebody who has no pretense or affectation. Like she is just somebody who's like, this is the best match for me, this is the best way to get ahead in my position, and I'm not too proud to marry somebody I clearly don't love if it's just going to give me security. And it is, I think it's important, or interesting at least, to see the very opposite end of the polar opposite of the main character's flaws too. Like, there's discretion is a good thing, but not in excess, and a complete lack of discretion can be just as harmful.
I don't know though. I feel the Darcy Elizabeth relationship, which we're going to get to shortly, and their first like really fiery encounter, is of the scorch the earth variety. I mean, admittedly, it's in private, or as private as it can be in someone else's house. It's not at a ball or in public. But I don't know. I'd like to see some side spin-off with Charlotte and Collins, that she kind of breaks him right down and builds him back up properly, and then they actually go on to a long and productive and hand-holdingly happy marriage.
Actually,
55 years out.
that's the Coen. That's
Yeah. Like I would like to see. I'd like to see that attempted. I mean, no one would, but
Well, I mean,
maybe not pretense.
now.
Maybe not pretense, but well, Pride and Prejudice. But yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the episode that Wickham runs off with the other girl?
No.
Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize.
Edit that.
No, this is no. But should we get to the proposal or the exchange?
I think I'd like to spend a few minutes on the scene with Colonel Fitzwilliam in the
in front of Rosings, yeah.
well, no, in the when they're playing, she's playing on the pianoforte, and Darcy comes in, and it's between the three of them, and it's just very fascinating that she has an opportunity to maybe put Darcy in his place, but instead of oh, he didn't dance, oh, it was terrible. It's a teasing kind of relationship back and forth, and it's good because that's one of the first times where, remember in the series in the session before where he's kind of joking about the whole walking around the room with Caroline and Elizabeth, whereas this one it's more of a I feel like it's more of a friendly conversation with Colonel Fitzwilliam and with Darcy and with Elizabeth, where she's teasing him about, he was horrible back then, like he didn't dance with anyone, yada yada. And that was an event that was kind of, I'm not going to say painful to her, but it was definitely something that she remembered being turned down or put down because there was a lack of men there. But then turning that into a playful situation, I just thought that was very interesting on Elizabeth's part to do that, and then even with the third person there, because maybe it was supposed to make Darcy feel a little more uncomfortable. Because remember, the last conversation was a little more uncomfortable when that
was an actual argument, and like they were actually debating. Yeah. That was a mutual respect argument, though. Here, I think that's classic Elizabeth in that she understands and she observes the politeness and the rituals of society, but she also is very self-deprecating of it. So I feel that's her. She's finally kind of out of the way of you can keep each other, and she's like, you know what? I can live with Fitzwilliam, and not while Darcy's not my favorite, given the breadth of the company that I currently have to deal with.
Right.
We're
Darcy's
not in the
choice.
room with DeBurr, and then she's like, "What are you people talking about in there?" Like she's.
Oh, and that's so subtle too. His eyes slightly rolls, and oh my goodness, that's
Darcy.
Darcy, yes,
Yes, there's a scene later where Darcy just brushes off DeBurr, like so he's above her in rank somehow. Or at least equal enough that he can just. Yep. Whereas no one else would have the stones to do it. Yeah.
Well, and it's like you were saying earlier, making the connection to Mrs. Bennet. It's the perfect counterpoint to these are my lousy relatives. This is my family.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a good point. And the intermarriage thing is happening, or potential there is in there as well. Yeah, but how about those fireplaces in Rosings Park?
They were pretty nice, weren't
they? Those
were
some nice fireplaces.
There was not a lot of scenes on that, though.
I always feel...
You were looking for it? You were looking for it?
No. I always feel the first time I watched the miniseries, many, many years ago, the one thing I remembered about the whole thing was Colin going on about the fireplaces. I'm like, are we watching an edit? Because there seemed to be a distinct lack of fireplace talk, although it is there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big
mess up.
Well, actually, before we get into that, we should talk about there is some Jane.
That's right.
Oh, Jane,
stuff in here. Yeah, everyone forgets Jane. This is the point. There's the whole sequence of Elizabeth reading the London letters.
Yeah.
It's nice too. It's a really long, like up the window crane shot. It's very lovely, very exquisite for television. Where she's learning about what is happening in London. So she's at the Gardener's Grace Church Street estate, which is supposedly, according to Caroline and whatnot,
Hurst.
and her sister, Mrs. Hurst, that's in like a shit part of town. I mean, I don't know.
Nice, yeah.
They show it, and I'm like, not so bad.
Yeah,
not so bad.
There. Yeah.
Like, holy, cut them some slack.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Jane is stuck in the window like Rapunzel, waiting for. And they do have a scene where Carolyn kind of shows up and basically says, "You're not accepted in our company," and it's all very sad.
Mm-hmm.
But this will be important. I just wanted to mention that just for those listening.
So the good part, or the great part about Jane's character in that is that she feels still like she wants to give forgiveness.
There can't help but be a modern part of you that is saying, Jane, you're playing the sucker here. Like you're sitting in the window. Bingley's out there for the taking. You're just going to pine in the window. That, I think, as a modern, proactive way of that people approach these things nowadays, that I'm going to sit in my place and wait.
But believing the best of people, I mean, that's...
Oh, it's good on paper.
Okay, fine.
We're just working our marriage out here. Don't mind us, Matt.
Man.
Is he always so sweet?
Yes. Very much.
I mean, I appreciate in theory the Janes of the world, but it's a little much to take her passive. It's impossible to not be on board with Elizabeth in this series. She is kind of the best of. She's aggressive enough. She's intelligent enough. She's introspective enough. Like Jane is almost like a default setting. They make comedy in the series of Jane stretching the situation to the positive, like to the breaking point.
You hold that. We'll come back and we'll see what you think about your Jane in the next one.
Okay. Okay, so the big climax, as you said earlier, of this episode is Darcy just storming into the Collins house when everybody's out except for Elizabeth, and he's agitated and
can't sit still. Yeah,
totally beyond the pale in terms of putting his words together. This is, I mean, it's clumsy. It's beautifully clumsy. Like it's a real testament to Firth's body language of the scene. But there is some. So he comes in. He basically just word salads a proposal out, and he almost does. You tend to wonder. I mentioned before that Mr. Collins is somewhere on the Asperger's, or on the autistic spectrum. The way they make Collins and Darcy interact, and the way Darcy bursts into this room, it wouldn't be unfair to say that he's not in his own. It's a better place, but in his own place on the spectrum.
Well, I kind of wonder, because I just, you kind of think, okay, Mr. Darcy, where did you ever think anything that you just said would have been acceptable in any way?
That is the narcissistic element of that, because he does his own PowerPoint presentation here of saying, I'm throwing out my family. Like he hasn't even said hi really at this point.
That's true,
I'm throwing away my family. But I mean, it's all supposed to be awesome that he loves her so much, but again, he's got his bullet points in the wrong order, and he just dry heaves it all out. It's really good. It's a really good scene. But then, does she immediately retort? Yeah. She does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But he doesn't leave, because I know there's a scene.
Yeah, because he can't believe it.
That's right. He can't believe it.
He said, why, with such little civility? that I'm getting this rejection, basically. Yeah.
Well, and his argument is that she is below his station, and her argument is that he is well below any common standard of politeness,
Yes.
like with the way he speaks.
Well,
That's
and she doesn't like him.
the disconnect.
And she doesn't like him.
But they get some nice Citizen Kane framing in this sequence.
No, that is the scene before that, where he comes over to visit.
And they both sit on opposite sides of the frame.
Remember, because he comes in and he starts asking about stuff, and how is it? This is an easy distance from Hertfordshire, and 50 miles. Well, near and far is rather relative, right? And so they start having that conversation. Right?
No, I didn't. I
Totally
merged those.
different.
We skipped
You
that
did,
then.
you did.
I just wanted to point out how much I like the framing of that, and how much I don't understand how that worked on BBC in 1995. Because if you're pan and scanning.
Yes, yeah.
That down to a square TV, you lose the magic of that emotional spacing between the two. It's interesting watching it like as we usually watch it now in a widescreen format. But I have to imagine that the original television viewers, whether you were on BBC in 1995 or A&E in the States in 1996, you would end up with some cropped version of that, which actually undermines some of the quite sophisticated filmmaking that has gone into this.
I like in that scene where she left some space. She just left a little bit of break, kind of saying, you know what, I've talked, your turn, think of something, because we're just going to argue if I bring up a conversation. So she kind of gave a little bit of a break.
This is not in the burst-in. This is
not
in the previous
in the
scene.
proposal.
Yeah.
No. Back to the burst-in, yeah.
Okay.
You get a sense of him planning to propose in that
yes,
instance
you
when
do.
he comes in. And then when he comes in for the second time, you kind of gear yourself for it. And like you said, yeah, it's the most awkward proposal ever.
Well, the idea that he would be refused seems to never have crossed his mind. Like, never, like, it doesn't matter what I say, I'm going to be accepted. And it doesn't even matter whether it's a proposal. It just seems like I am so used to, not even a thought, just
getting my way.
I always get what I want, so this is what I want. Do, right? So,
That's kind of the attitude Collins took in his situation.
But I have a little bit more sympathy with Darcy. I'm
he has better hair.
I'm not the best.
Better hair. Back to the hair. Way to go.
Yeah, I'm certainly not the best at this, but I do get a sense that there's a very limited experience Darcy has with women in this particular context, because either...
I'm sorry. Are you saying that Mr. Collins has more experience with women in this context? Because I'd have to argue with you on that one.
No, I'm saying that both of them have more experience than I do, but... No, I think Collins is a little bit more of a buffoon, but I think he's very, very limited in that as well, and when he makes reference to the game. But I think in terms of Darcy's dealings with women, I think they are even more limited. Like, he's not presented as a social person to begin with. And
right.
As we learn in the next chapter, he's the one who's been a ward, or his sister is his ward. His Aunt de Berg is obviously off in her own little world, and in any other situation where he does interact with women, it does seem to be that they're usually after his money, or they're not on his standing, and
right.
Or they're in his employ.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when he actually, like, I don't think he's ever experienced or been with a woman that he has an attraction to in this sense, and I totally agree. Maybe not the best thing to lead out with saying, "Hey, you come from scum, but I love you nonetheless."
Yeah. We can all learn something from that approach.
I'd like to see your power.
But that's
my power.
It's like his way of showing affection is to say, completely disregard this, because I know many, many women chase after me because of my wealth and my standing, but I just want you to know right up front that, I know what your situation is. I'm fully aware of that, and that doesn't mean anything to me. Now, he needs to sugarcoat it, and he needs to present it a little bit more diplomatically.
These are all facts, but it's how you arrange those facts in human interaction that makes...
If Mr. Darcy had you as a speechwriter, it would have been much better, I'm sure. Yes.
I don't know. I don't know, but you know, and
given though
for Collins, so I think the main difference though between those two proposals is that Collins is there. He's there to look for a wife. He doesn't care about love or anything. There is no
surprise. There's no surprise either. Like Collins, like literally in the previous episode, the camera says it all. He's actually shopping.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm walking home with a purchase. I mean, that's really, what he's saying, whereas Darcy is taken by surprise. Like he had no intention of doing any of this. And he sees this. He has his kind of first at the dance, they have their thing. Then they have their like intellectual like bona fides out on the table, like in the other conversation. And then I'm not sure if he's there when Elizabeth kind of upbraids Catherine de Bourgh, which I'm sure would earn praise in Darcy's eyes if he saw it. Not in the station thing, but in de Bourgh in particular, like in particular. But now he's like, this scene is the real fireworks. This is the first true fireworks in the scene, because Elizabeth, I don't think she minces words at all. She just...
No, but she does start off trying to be a little more like, I thank you, and we're done. But then he keeps asking, right? And it's like, okay, here it is, right? So. And
she gives him is it 2 reasons or 3 reasons why? She's like, 1,
my sister.
You wrecked my thing. We didn't mention the long walk and talk with Fitzwilliam where he actually tells her that Darcy,
yes.
But that's earlier in the episode. That doesn't bear mentioning, other than that classic Sorkin TV, let's walk and talk. But then there was what was the second reason?
Wickham.
Wickham, like what he's done to Wickham. And was there a third, or was that just the 2 was enough? Oh yeah. So she gives him her own kind of PowerPoint rebuttal, and then he I don't know if he storms out, but he
thank you.
You
said very enough.
He leaves as awkward as he arrives, in a huff, I would say.
Oh yeah.
And that's the freeze frame at the end of this episode, right?
Yeah.
Him stepping out the door. Any other takeaways from?
I don't know. I really find the whole Charlotte and Collins, that whole conversation where she expresses how she spends her day, how they can spend a whole day apart. It makes you.
It's a little too close to home.
Yeah.
I told you.
We're
working on our marriage.
Time in the theater. No, but
I'll tell you this though. I can't get a vouchsafe and a make haste into a single sentence.
Yeah.
Like points for Collins on that one.
You'll find a way. I'm sure you'll find a way.
I just did, actually. But the other thing with Collins is, as polite as he is and sycophantic as he is between Catherine de Bourgh, he's kind of a monster on his own territory. The way he's like perpetually in a panic for things that nobody else seems to care about. Like he actually does kind of rang out his wife, like we're supposed to be gone, we're late.
Well, I think that pretty much concludes it for Chapter 3 of Pride and Prejudice and Podcasts. Until next time, cue the lace.